With the first pick in the 2015 NFL Draft, we select Sports Scene as the best place for USC athletics.
From Nelson Aguilar and Leonard Williams to Olympic sports making their playoff chases, we got you covered. Let's get this party started.
And for the final time this semester, welcome to Sports Scene, where we broadcast from the Julie Chen, Leslie Moonves, and CBS Media Center. I'm Ken Masenchi.
And I'm Evan Budrovich, anxiously awaiting who Ken would actually select with the first pick in that draft.
Well, you know I'm going to go with Leonard Williams. But we kick off the show with a special USC preview to the NFL Draft, and the draft's first round starts tomorrow night. 9 Trojans are hoping to hear their name called by the commissioner during the 7 rounds. Williams and Nelson Aguilar anchored the strong Trojan class, with both expected to go in the first round. Buck Allen, Hayes Pollard, and Josh Shaw are among the other Trojans that hope to get picked up during the weekend. And to get a more in-depth look on where some of the Trojans will land, we send it over to Alyssa, who is with a special guest.
Thanks, Ken. I'm joined by Pac-12 Network's host, Mike Yam. So, Mike, let's get right to it with Leonard Williams. Last season, he had 80 tackles, 9.5 for loss, 7 sacks, 1 interception, and 3 forced fumbles. Obviously a top pick in the draft, anywhere between the top 3 and top 5. What do you think Leonard has to offer a team?
Alyssa, I'm always surprised when people talk about Leonard Williams as someone that it could go 4th or 5th in the draft, at least when you look at the measurables. I mean, he is a freak. We've been talking about him for 2 seasons on the Pac-12 networks as a top 5 pick. I think based off of last season, it's abundantly clear in my mind he should be able to, in terms of talent, go number 1 overall. It's not going to happen. Jameis Winston, that conversation is going to be there. I'd make the argument, though, Marcus Mariota should probably be in front of Jameis Winston. Not that I'm trying to carry the torch in that Pac-12 flag, but the reality is when you look at defensive players like Leonard Williams, the hands, the ability, his strength, and also scheme-wise, his ability, I mean, it doesn't matter if it's a 4-3 or a 3-4. He's always talked about his ability to create essentially a pass rush. When you talk to scouts, the one impressive thing that they always focus in on with Leonard Williams is not just his ability to get to the quarterback, as you see here, but his ability to sort of change game plans. Offensive teams, when they go and they know Leonard Williams is on the other side of the football, they're now concerned about what he can potentially do on the football field. So in my mind, I think that's one of the big reasons why. If I had the number 1 overall pick and I wasn't in need of a quarterback, Leonard Williams, in my mind, is a lock for 1.
Well, you think he's number 1. We're not exactly sure where in that top 5 he'll go, but here's what Leonard had to say back at Pro Day about possibly getting passed up from that top spot.
I'm just going to try to tell those guys, if you pick a quarterback over me, I'm going to hurt them. So I'm joking, but I just, I want to show them that I'm definitely worth picking. So just try to show them at the drills.
So for more on where Leonard could go, let's toss it to Evan with Jeremy Bergman and Jacob Friedman for Trojan Horse.
Thanks, Alyssa. We heard what Mike Yam has to say, but let's discuss where the big cat will call home in the first round. Jeremy, I want to start with you in the NFL Draft. What team do you think will select Leonard Williams?
Well, the first 2 picks are designated for Jameis Winston and Marcus Mariota. Winston's going to go to the Bucs. Mariota's going to go to whoever as the second pick. We don't know yet. That means Williams will probably fall to the Jaguars at 3. He's the best overall athlete and prospect in the draft. He's a great interview. Executives love Leonard Williams. I think he's going to go to the Jags because he's a steal at 3, and if he drops any further, that's a big mistake by any of the other NFL teams.
Well, I think he is going to get passed up at 3. I think the team with the 3rd pick, Jacksonville, is going to go with Dante Fowler. Head coach of Jacksonville, Gus Bradley, likes his really athletic guys, and Leonard is a little bit less of a pass rusher than Fowler. But I think that means Leonard will end up with the Oakland Raiders, which is the perfect place for a USC Trojan to be. Former USC Trojan Jack Del Rio is the head coach over there. Defensive coordinator Ken Norton also has some USC ties. And I think that Leonard Williams working with Khalil Mack, who's their superstar outside linebacker, I really think that's going to be a very potent duo, and that's where I see him going.
And keep in mind, guys, when Williams eventually gets drafted, the Trojans will end a 2-year drought of not having players selected in the first round.
Well, thanks, guys. Let's move over to Nelson Aguilar. The wide receiver had a career season last year. Over 104 catches for over 1,000 yards, 12 touchdowns. He's also a punt returner for the Trojans and tied a USC record with 4 career punts, 4 touchdowns. He posted a 4.42 40 time at the Combine. So, Mike, what can Nelson contribute to an NFL team?
I don't know what's more impressive, his 40 time or Jeremy's mustache. I don't know if you have a preference on that. That's a sight at this point. But the point is, at least with Nelson Aguilar as a wide receiver, there are so many things he can offer a lot of NFL teams. I think it depends. I don't know if he's a first-round guy. I think he's potentially got that talent, and I think depending on need for a specific NFL team, he could go in that first round. But I think it all circles around the same point. He's, in my mind, more of a guy that you're going to use in the NFL level in that slot spot as opposed to, sort of that big target, that big wide receiver. And as a comparison, you can make the argument, hey, Jalen Strong might be the the next talented, and I'd make an argument maybe more talented and has more upside than a guy like Nelson Aguilar, but the difference is their size and those measurables. Jalen Strong is one of those guys, as you as an SC fan certainly knows, can get up there and be sort of that safety net. We saw it with Mike Bercovici or Taylor Kelly. I think if an NFL team has that big wide receiver already in the fold, then I think Nelson Aguilar, a guy that can be that speedster, potentially could really serve an NFL team very well. I don't know if he's necessarily as talented as some of the other wide receivers we've seen, but I think there's as much upside as we've seen from definitely wide receivers. The problem at that wide receiver spot, while it's always sort of that cachet and that spot you always want to have that big high-profile guy, I just don't know if he's going to be able to separate himself from some of the other guys that are in this draft.
So as we said, some draft experts think that Nelson will sneak into the first round. As we've shown you, he does have a lot to offer a team. Let's go back to Trojan Horse to see what they think about Nelson and possibly being in the first round selection.
So from the big cat to the big catch, Nelson Aguilar continues to skyrocket in draft boards and could find himself a nice first-round payout. But Jacob, I want to start with you. Do you think Nelson Aguilar is worthy of that first-round grade?
I really do think he is. I think that there's a really good crop of wide receivers, but I also think wide receiver is a really big need for a lot of teams in this draft. An example of a perfect spot for Nelson Aguilar would be the Carolina Panthers at pick number 25. They have a deep wide receiver in Kelvin Benjamin. The Aguilar, for me, Evan, is really the perfect number 2 because he can catch balls out of the slot. He has really good hands. He can make those shorter grabs. So if you pair him with a really big deep threat, he is a first-round value for me.
He might go in the first round, but I don't think he's a first-round value. By saying that he's going to go in the first round, that means that you think that he's going to be better than both Marquise Lee and Robert Woods, who are both second-round draft picks. I don't see that. I don't see the production out of him in his last year at USC translating as well to the NFL as Robert Woods has. He might go in the first because wide receivers are a premium, but he probably shouldn't. I'd see him maybe falling to the Jets at 6 in the second round. And because there are very needy teams at the front of the second round, more so than I think at the back of the first.
And it's interesting now how you think about it. Aguilar's decision to leave a year early looks almost better for him now as a possible first-round pick.
I think it's really interesting, Evan and Jeremy, that Aguilar, I think, is going to be a first-round pick because for what he has that Robert Woods and Marquise Lee didn't have is a clean bill of health. Nelson Aguilar has been almost spot-free with his health the last 2 years while at USC, while Woods and Lee both had their senior seasons cut short by injuries. And I think the fact that you have a healthy wide receiver, which is a rarity in the NFL these days, combined with his NFL-ready skills that he could go in and be a number 2 and catch 50 passes and have 800 yards as a rookie, really makes him a good value in the first round towards the end.
Definitely. I think he could also really help a team being a punt returner, kick returner. Marquise Lee and Robert Woods haven't really had that type of play in the NFL, but Nelson really showed in his last year at USC that he could take it to the distance as a punt returner.
Well, certainly a guy that we'll have to catch to see what his draft stock's like. Possibly first round, maybe as Jeremy mentioned, early in the second round.
Moving to Josh Shaw, the cornerback missed 10 games last season because of his off-the-field issues, but in 2013 he was second on the team with 4 interceptions and third with 67 tackles. He had a great showing at the Combine, though, a top performer with 26 reps at the bench press, and showed his speed with a 4.44 40 time.
Yeah, listen, he had to show off at the Combine based off of the season that he had. He only played 3 games. I think he started just 2 of them. You missed 10 games, and the reason why you missed some of those games, I think, is the interesting story. We've talked about it. We've had some opportunities to speak to some scouts and some NFL personnel. We were joking. Right around the Combine, they bring in all the guys and they have their interviews with different players or different coaches and different general managers and some other assistants, and they pepper these guys with questions. And we joke that if you had to pick one guy in the country who you wanted to be a fly on the wall for their interview, Josh Shaw was either number 1 on your list or number 2, and the other guy being Marcus Peters at UW because of some of the issues that he's had. So in my mind, Josh Shaw, if he doesn't miss those games, maybe he's not as rusty as he was down the stretch in those final 3. I don't know if you can necessarily take a look at those 3 games and assess what kind of player Josh Shaw can be for your NFL team. I think the versatility that he has shown, corner, safety, to be able to play both of those things, in my mind, I see him more as a safety at the NFL level. I know we saw him at times rocking that position for USC, but in my mind, I don't know how much of an issue some of the off-the-field stuff is going to be for him. I do think it did hurt his stock a little bit, and for a guy that might have been in that 3rd or 4th round, I still think he drops a little bit more. But based off of the numbers that you talked about in terms of his production at the Combine, the guy potentially could be scary. He was essentially going to be one of the leaders on this defense. It's a shame that USC didn't have him this year.
So let's toss it back over to the Trojan Horse crew, see where they think Josh Shaw will go.
Given what transpired over the course of the last season, along with his workouts in the Senior Bowl and the Combine, Jacob, when do you think a player like Josh Shaw could be selected in this draft?
11, I think his draft stock has fallen, but I still think he's almost a lock to go in the NFL draft. It'll just be more in the 5th and the 6th round compared to the 3rd or 4th, maybe even 2nd if he had been playing his entire senior year. Because I think even though he hasn't played, we've really seen in last season, the season before, sort of, he does have a lot of weaknesses. He's not very good off the line of scrimmage. He gets beat really often, and he doesn't have that top line speed you want out of your cornerbacks because he was a safety, which means he's not quite as fast. So I think that's going to make him slip, and not as much the off the field issues.
If you had asked me this question last year after his junior season, I would have said Josh Shaw is going to go in rounds 2 or 3. But of course, after the off-field incident and missing an entire season of play and game tape, not being able to show NFL teams what he's made of, he's obviously going to drop at least to the 4th or 5th round. Like you said, he's good off the line of scrimmage, but he's not fast. He's not that big. In coverage, we don't know how he's going to be able to play in a spread offense or against a spread offense. So I could see Josh Shaw going 5, but he could drop to 6.
And it's interesting, Jacob. We saw him in the Senior Bowl and then in that UCLA game, getting some reps late in the season and showing himself what we kind of expected from last year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he definitely has really improved his stock in the Senior Bowl and in sort of the NFL Combine, but I think it's at the point where it's not because of his off-the-field issues. It's more evident because he's just really not the elite cornerback prospect that we thought he was a year ago.
Well, Shaw enters the draft as a tweener prospect, and we'll see what position lies for him possibly later in the upcoming rounds.
So lastly, we move on to George Farmer. The wide receiver had an injury-plagued career. Didn't get to play much until last season. Coming out of high school, though, he was said to be faster than Robert Woods and Marquise Lee. Wow. He had 30 catches and 363 yards in his career with 4 touchdowns. A lot of people were really surprised when he came out and said he was going to go to the draft. But he proved himself at Pro Day with that 4.35 40 time. Mike, where do you think he's going to get drafted, if at all?
Yeah, speed kills, and I think that's the enticing thing about George Farmer. In my mind, I don't think he gets drafted. I think, and that might even be a better situation for a guy like him who's had to deal with some injuries. We just don't know how effective he can be. We didn't know how effective he was going to be able to be at the college level, although you talk about the freak athleticism. At times, you know what he's working with. It is scary. It's you want to salivate if you're an NFL GM or a coach at the talent that potentially is there. The problem is you haven't seen it. So in my mind, I just don't know if he's worth one of those draft picks. What I would do if I was George Farmer, I'd be more hopeful, more optimistic as being an undrafted free agent, because then you get to find that fit that might be better off for your skill set. Whereas you get drafted, all of a sudden you're locked into a role with a team that you might not even be able to produce for. In my mind, I think I was surprised, sounds like you were surprised, and I think maybe even the coaching staff here at USC was surprised that he's not going to be wearing a uniform for him this year.
So Mike thinks George Farmer will probably not get drafted. Let's toss it over to Trojan Horse, see what they think.
So George Farmer is hoping to be drafted in the NFL as well, with some pure athleticism to his table. Guys, we know the speed that Farmer brings to the table, but Jeremy, where do you think George, will he be drafted, and if so, by who?
I don't know by who, but he's going in a late round. I definitely think George Farmer is going to be drafted, probably just because the NFL GMs at that point in the draft are either going to be tired and just say, why not? Let's get a guy who has 4.3 speed, amazing athleticism. He suffered a bunch of injuries at USC, and he was a great high school prospect. He didn't, reach his full potential, but maybe his spot is in the NFL. He didn't really have the production numbers only because there were so many healthier and more experienced wide receivers in front of him at USC. So I'd like to see an NFL team take a chance on him in the 7th round.
Personally, Evan and Jeremy, I don't think he's getting drafted. Jeremy said there was more healthy and more experienced receivers. If you want to play in the NFL, you need to be the best guy. And obviously, he wasn't going to be the best wide receiver on this team with Nelson Aguilar, but he had 25 catches in his one healthy year. And I understand that it is a good idea for him to come out because he knows that he's injury prone, but that's also going to hurt him in the draft stock because wide receivers are very injury prone. And knowing that he's missed 3 out of the last 4 years with injuries, I think he's going to be a good undrafted free agent. I think a team is, as soon as the 7th round wraps up, we're going to hear within a couple of hours George Farmer has been invited to a training camp, but I don't think a team is going to risk a draft pick on such an unproven commodity.
And Jeremy, we saw the 2-touchdown game against Notre Dame. He went deep a couple times, showing you the speed. Does that translate at all possibly to being a 7th, 6th round draft pick?
Definitely. It was the USC's last regular season game, and he did it against a big rival on a national network. I think NFL executives are going to look at Farmer, see what he did late in his career, not back in junior year, sophomore year, what he did late in his career, and really be impressed. So I think he's going to go 7 in the 7th round.
Well, thanks, guys. That wraps up our Trojan Horse segment here for the draft. We'll get started from Chicago coming up this week.
Well, thanks, guys, for all that analysis. Another former Trojan looking to get drafted is Hayes Pollard. Hayes was a 4-year starter here and has gone through all the ups and downs. He's emerged as a leader, and he wrote a letter to the NFL to show what he has to offer. Hayes said, "I went to USC to fulfill my father's dream. I got my degree to fulfill my mother's dream, and now I'm writing this letter to you to fulfill my dream. I understand that I'm facing a tremendous challenge, but I'm confident that I'm up for it. If you draft me, know that I have no plans on being just good." Now let's go to Ken at the Sports Pod to see what some of these former Trojans are up to in the days leading up to the draft.
Thanks, Alyssa. Now that we've heard about where the former Trojans might land, it's time to hear from the players themselves through social media. Tight end Randall Telfer is getting in touch with his spiritual side. He posted to Instagram, "No one said it was going to be easy. You can cry, just don't be a baby about it. #SpiritAnimal." The big cat Leonard Williams spent some time behind the camera during a visit to ESPN working the jib camera. And he probably didn't do a better job than our boy Lucas though, but he's about to make millions, so it doesn't really matter. Linebacker Hayes Pollard is a warrior and showed why by eating some Chanos carne asada fries for his last meal before getting his wisdom teeth pulled out last week. And he later tweeted, "Hayes Pollard 1, dentist and teeth 0. And Nelson Aguilar sent out a tweet saying he was in paradise working on his game in his new Adidas gear. And he looks pretty fresh in it, I must say. And that's the best from the future NFL players. Now let's toss it over to Reed Silverman for a look at Trojan teams in the postseason.
Thanks, Ken. Let's shift gears and wrap up some postseason action. Let's light the torch. We start with men's golf. The 16th ranked Trojans entered the 4th and final day of the Pac-12 championships in 3rd place. The Trojans were in 1st place but are now 10 over. The Trojans were led by Rico Oye, who is currently tied at 13th at 1 over 271. Here's a look at the final scores from the Pac-12 championships. Diving deep into the sand, the top-ranked sand volleyball team heads to Alabama on Friday, seeking its first national championship. The women of Troy are the top seed and are taking on 9-seed Stetson in the first round. The women of Troy are making their 3rd team appearance and have won each of the last 2 pairs titles. They look to stay undefeated on Friday, closing up with the AVCA National Championships this weekend. The women's lacrosse team is heading to Denver for the semifinals of the MPSF tournament. The women of Troy are the 2 seed and have a bye going into the quarterfinals. Sports scene Ben Albert spoke with the team before Friday's MPSF tournament.
Behind me, the USC women's lacrosse team is currently preparing for the MPSF conference tournament at the end of the week. Leading the women of Troy in points scored this season is junior attacker Cara DeLira, who tallied 60 points on 32 goals and 28 assists. She will look to continue her role as both a scorer and a facilitator this weekend.
I get more hyped up when I have an assist over a goal because I really like to see other girls on my team scoring and just playing really well together. That's really all that matters.
The women of Troy also feature a formidable defensive line this year, thanks to a combination of communication and cohesion that has been crucial to their success.
With our defensive unit, even though we have new players coming in and out, we all have a mutual understanding of what we're supposed to be doing and have a good collective team defense.
Though the women of Troy won't find out who their matchup on Saturday is with until the conclusion of the Friday matchup between Oregon and Denver, the women of Troy are confident that if they just take care of themselves and play their game, they're going to be just fine. From Sports Scene, I'm Ben Jarvis Green Albert.
To the hardwood, the 8th-ranked men's volleyball team is prepping for a matchup against number 2 UC Irvine in the MPSF semifinals. The Trojans took down BYU in a 5-set thriller over the weekend. The team says they're focusing on their own play rather than getting distracted by their competitors. The last time these teams met, USC dropped a tough 5-set thriller at the Galen Center.
Right now, I think we're just focusing on us, really. I think that's first and foremost. Honestly, when you're trying to go into a big match or any match at all, really focus on getting better throughout the whole week, even though it's playoffs. You want to focus on little things that you haven't been doing as well in the matches or you want to work on. The
Trojans take on the Anteaters on Thursday night. With a win, they'll advance to the NPSF final against either Hawaii or Pepperdine. Well, that's all from Lighting the Torch. Let's toss it over to Ken with more from a player who's about to start some postseason play.
Thanks, Reed. And women's water polo is in the NCAA tournament for the 12th straight year. And to give us an inside perspective on the team, we welcome senior Monica Vavic. Monica, thanks for joining us.
No problem.
So the first question, you've experienced the national title 3 times, or national tournament 3 times, won the title in 2013, have been in the title game twice. But there's only 3 of you that were on that championship winning team. What are you telling those young players about heading into the tournament, what it's going to be like?
Well, we're just teaching them how to prepare. The most important thing is to prepare, and we're just really focusing on that, just, you know, going back to the games we've played, 4 tough games this season, and we're really reflecting back on those experiences to help them go into these games. Also, the younger girls that are playing for us aren't necessarily immature water polo players. We've got 2 twins that have both won world championships. We have Brianna DeBow, who's also won a youth championship. So we've got a lot of girls that have got a couple things under their belt. So we're definitely not necessarily inexperienced, although they may have not played in collegiate championship games. They've played in other championship games, like as well as CIF on top of world and national champions.
And so I've heard that water polo is pretty crazy, especially under the water. Crazy things happen. What have been some crazy things that have happened to you? I've made it under the radar for most of my career. Not too many crazy things. I think I've had my suit ripped once, where I actually had to get out holding my suit up so that I didn't, you know, scare any children. But I've gotten a couple concussions. I mean, for me, nothing too crazy. I've had friends get their hands broken, split, noses broken. Concussions are kind of they happen often, but nothing too crazy. Wow. And you've had this unique experience, kind of a family affair here. You've playing for your dad. You've had your brother succeed as well. What has that dynamic been like?
It's been really good. The nice thing for me is because I am the younger daughter, I got to watch my brother kind of go through the program and learn from his experiences. Also, it was a growing experience for my father as well. Having coached Nicola the first year, it was really a learning experience. And, you know, seeing how much can you be a coach, how much do you need to be a father, what is that dynamic? And so when I came in, he kind of was a little bit more experienced in that, and so I had a much smoother path. And then as having my brother be a player on the team, it was just a blessing. He's an incredibly talented player. He's just a brilliant mind, and it was really nice having somebody that I could always go to who was really experiencing the same thing that I was going through, went through the same type of circumstances, and it was really special to have him there, and I really miss him right now, not being able to go to him for last-minute advice before our big tournament.
Well, you seem to have been doing pretty well. You're the all-time leading scorer in USC history. Have you had time to reflect on that?
Not really, because our focus is always to get at NCAA championships. So your goal moving forward doesn't matter which game you win or, you know, what's ahead of you, always focusing on just making our team get better and focusing on the end goal being that NCAA championship. So no, I'm just more stressed about NCAAs and performing the best that I physically can at when it matters the most.
So we'll end on this. Let's imagine you're walking out with a second national title, diploma in hand. What's next?
Oh goodness, I don't know. Be wonderful to have a second national championship, that's for sure. But I mean, there's the possibility of going to the Olympics. I've had a conversation earlier in the year with the head national team coach. I was on the national team when I was a sophomore, and then I kind of hung up my suit for a little bit, needed to take some time off. But I'm definitely possibly looking towards going for Rio 2016 if the national team will have me back. Other than that, if I don't go there, I will probably continue playing overseas somewhere. Or just kind of broaden my experience. I've got, like I said, my brother isn't here right now because he's actually training in Australia and playing with clubs overseas. And there's a lot of opportunities to travel and play great water polo and really just get to kind of see the world. And so I'm going to see if I can take that to my advantage and play all over the world and get some experience.
Well, best of luck to you in the tournament. Best of luck to you in the future. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And now we send it back to Evan at the monitor.
Well, Ken, we've gotten to that point in the year now where some good things just come to an end. Let's take a look back at some of the best and brightest moments of this semester.
We bring you Sports Scene, an in-depth show about all things USC athletics.
Everything you see during the week, we're taking that to the next level, covering all 21 intercollegiate athletic programs.
So here's where USC is standing right now. Thanks to a big day across the board, the Fab Five has been finalized.
USC hosted scouts from all over the NFL and put on a show in hopes of boosting their draft stock.
What do you guys take away from it?
I think we were really excited actually coming off of that game. It was kind of a heartbreaker.
Is that the same expectation, get that final win and get to the playoffs?
I mean, yes, we haven't been in playoffs in so long, so obviously we want to make it, but we have a little bit higher expectations.
How do you take that next step to national title?
You know, it was great winning an individual paired title with Kirby, but it wasn't the same winning without the team.
You've seen the men's team win championships while you've been here.
Yeah.
Does that fire you up now that you're in a position to get one?
Oh, totally.
Your last season at the helm after 29 seasons at USC. What are you going to take away from coaching rugby here, playing rugby here?
You better talk, because I'll get too emotional.
Give me your best broadcast impersonation of a big play or a big moment for you.
Oh my goodness, all right. I like Stuart Scott, so one of the things would just be those little side notes or those ad-libs like, booyah.
We start with men's volleyball, traveling to compete against UCSB in sunny Santa Barbara.
USC is always trying to fight back. Pat Hayden mentioned that he did try to repeal some of USC sanctions.
It's the most wonderful time of the year. That's right, it's March Madness.
I went out and asked some students some questions about USC men's basketball.
The Trojans' offense has been much more effective against zone.
We're spotlighting a matchup out of the Fraternity Basketball League.
And she's going to tell us a little bit about the meet this weekend.
The women of Troy will leave for New York on Thursday morning and then will play Stony Brook.
But despite their dominant win, they still believe there's things to improve on.
The best way to get revenge on the NCAA is to win. They came into the season ranked number 3 in the country, but now they're number 1.
USC men's club soccer team just finished a 2-2 draw.
Today's sports injury update is about strain and sprain injuries.
Time for a postseason edition of Lighting the Torch.
Just keep in mind now the championship search continues, and there are plenty of top 10 teams this year vying for that title number 101 before the season's come to an end.
And yeah, it's been a fun time here at Sports Scene. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Ken Masenchi.
And I'm Evan Modrovich. Goodbye for now, guys, until the very end.
Oh, that's good.
You also look at us. We'll start looking at Ken. I'll get it right. Yeah. Boom. Darn it. Jackson, big part of that. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Best of luck.
You see Cody? Cody right here?
Yeah.
Oh, we can go on the air. No, no.
Adlib!
Paolo, what is your take?
Gonna stick with it, you know? Like, give us now.
Can you take me higher?
Iman Marshall!
Yeah.
Good night.